Hi, my name is Peggy Lauritsen, and welcome to RootsTech. This is session 462482, and it is part one of a two-part series that you will be hearing from me today. I come from Ohio, and I'm happy that you've decided to join me today. First of all, we need to remember that all of this is content of mine, that the stories and the creation of it is mine. And with very few things that I've given credit to other websites, the pictures are all mine as well too. What we're going to be talking about in these two parts are the things that you can do while your ancestor is still alive, and a review of some of the basic information that you want to get from them while you can. And in part two, we'll talk about putting your ancestor's story together when they're already deceased, when you don't have the opportunity to ask them in person about their life. Now, there's actually two types of ancestral histories, and when you do an oral interview with one of your ancestors, you want to be prepared. You want to ask their permission. And if they're older, then you want to ask one question at a time. It'd probably be better to fly solo, mostly, to just kind of ask these questions with just a one-on-one. Although every now and then it might be good to have someone else there with you to maybe help jog their memory, but you don't want to overwhelm them. Sometimes one of the grandchildren might be able to help you as well, too, especially if they're using maybe some of their memories as a trigger for their grandparent or their aunt or their uncle. You may want to use some props. We'll get into some of those here in just a few minutes. Try really hard not to interrupt, because sometimes they will be talking and they'll go off on a tangent, and you may have that desire to get them back onto what you were really talking about. But if you can, without interrupting them, let them talk, because they may be giving you information that can be used as a springboard to take you to other information that you want to know about them and other records. Don't challenge the inaccuracies, even if you know that the year is wrong or the place is wrong. Don't challenge it. You may know the exact truth because you may have the actual record, but you don't want to get them flustered, so just let them go. Then there's another type of ancestral history that you want to consider, and that's researching the time period that your family lived in, especially those that have gone on before. So again, you want to concentrate on one family or one ancestor at a time. You want to track that family through time. Personally, I began with the 1940 census. That's the latest one available until next year. So what you want to do is find them beginning in 1940, where more than likely they're going to appear as an adult. Continue tracking them backwards until they begin to appear as a child in the household of their parents, and then keep that going as far back as you're able to. When you are researching in a new area or a new time period, you are a beginner. And as someone who speaks quite often at conferences, I have the opportunity to listen to a lot of really great talks. And one time at the end of the day, someone asked me, they said, "Peggy, what kind of classes did you take today?" And I said, "Well, I took beginners classes all day." And they're looking at me like, "What?" And I said, "Yes, because all of us are a beginner again. When we research a brand new grandmother's maiden name, or if we research into a state or a country, or a topic that we have not been familiar with before, we're a beginner again." Look at what the record is saying, and also look at what it isn't saying, too. We'll go over that a little bit in part two. And anytime that you are getting started in an area that you're just not really sure what town records are in New England or parish records in Louisiana, then go ahead and go into the FamilySearch wiki, and you'll learn all kinds of things about that area. Have a toolbox ready. Now, not maybe a regular one. I personally keep a bag that is ready to go all the time because I live not far from the Ohio Genealogical Society. And if I have a friend that says, Peggy, I want to go down there and research. You want to go with me? Yeah, I'm ready. I'll drop what I'm doing and let's go. So in that toolbox, I have things that I don't have to scurry around the house getting ready. I have a notebook. I have pens. I have a recording device, which could be just as simple as your phone. I have a small scanner, which again could be just as simple as your phone. When I do go to interview an ancestor, of which most of the time I'm the ancestor now, I take old photographs or an heirloom to get them thinking. I especially take any unidentified photos. They just may know something that I don't. I take a list of questions, not very many, maybe 8 or 10. And I specifically take some blank pedigree charts and family group records because I have sat with aunts and uncles who are giving me information and I'm like, okay, hold on a minute. I didn't know that they had had a baby that died early. Hang on, I didn't know this. Let me get this filled out. And they don't usually mind. When you're talking with these ancestors, there's all kinds of questions you can find everywhere on how to interview your ancestors. But I want to talk a little bit about different topics and themes. So choose some that are universal. Like, for instance, the little girl up in the top right. She is cooking with her grandmother. You know, what can that person remember about recipes and things that perhaps happened when they were in their grandmother's kitchens? What kind of smells and wallpaper, things like that kind of evoke a memory. What kind of a car did they have? It was a big deal. Cars were coming on the scene when my parents were growing up, so it was a big deal to have a car and to laugh and talk about how they just kind of jumbled you all over the place when you're trying to get somewhere. In the 1930s and 40s, there was a different type of fashion. Were they part of that fashion? Or like with my family, was the fashion whatever you could get, like flower sack dresses? What did they do for holidays and celebrations? Now that's an important clue for you because perhaps they didn't celebrate Christmas. Could they have been of a faith that did not? What did they do at the christening of a baby? Or was there one? Or what about Easter? Did any of those things happen when they were growing up? Because those things can lead you, perhaps, to church records. Did they have any sibling rivalry? Okay, now that is a lot more important than what we may think, because a lot of families have been fractured over the fact that Dad liked you best. So, ask them, was there any of the rough and tumble, that everybody liked the baby because the baby was the pet of the family and kind of held resentment in a way? Or, were there two brothers that just did not get along or two sisters that did not get along? Was there any of that going on? And could it be that that other sibling is still alive, but perhaps just was not part of the family anymore? What kind of family gatherings did they have? Did they have reunions? Did they have a family picnic on the major holidays? Did they have an actual family reunion where they got everybody together that was from that same family, all the siblings and everything? In my husband's family, there were 11 children. He's number 5 out of 11. And I remember going to reunions at his family's home in central Utah. And when you get that many children together, plus their spouses, plus the cousins at that time, you're looking at cousins numbering in the 45 and 50s. And then when they began to marry and their spouses and everything, you can have a lot of people just from these family gatherings. Ask them what kind of family gatherings they had. Sometimes people don't want to talk about their service in the military. My dad did not. My dad just didn't want to come up with any stories or anything like that. I have a few pictures, but like with my own father, he was working in a coal mine with several of his brothers in West Virginia. He was living there with my mother and 3 sisters, and he was the only one that was drafted from that area. And where was he sent? To Pearl Harbor. There's just sometimes people don't want to talk about maybe some of the things that they saw or they experienced. So maybe just a few things here and there. If it's too painful for them, don't push it. Perhaps you still have medals, or there may be even a uniform. I have my dad's uniform. It was so small. I don't even think my grandchildren would fit into it. Ask them about school, because a lot of times in areas where there has been record loss, there may have been some school records that have been kept on the county level or by the superintendent's office. This happened again to my family in an area of eastern Kentucky where they suffered extensive record loss at the courthouse. But I found exactly what I needed going through lots and lots of school records, because you have the parent and the guardian, and you also have all of the children that they're registering at school, plus their full birth date. That's better than what I could get from the census record, and it's better than anything else I got from anywhere. So ask them about school, and if they participated, were they an excellent school child? Did they get to finish school? Did they go on to higher education? Ask them about their school years. Now, sports, it was not a big thing in my family, but it sure has been in other families. Ask them if they have any memorabilia, anything laying around, or if you see a trophy like the one that is there, ask them if they have anything like that they could talk about. Did they excel? Did they not excel? Did they go on a sports scholarship somewhere? Ask them about their sports activities. Church and religion sometimes seems to be faltering as we come further into this century. But at the time that our ancestors lived, this may have been a very, very important part of their life. It's where people went to get married. It's where people went when they were buried. This was a source of comfort for the people of that time. This particular one is of a church that is in West Virginia. This is a picture of my dad getting baptized in the swimming pool at the YMCA. The other is my family at a church down in Mud Fork, West Virginia. The church is where they went to give them strength, to give them what they needed to get through hard times. Ask them about their work and their chores. Did they have any? Now that might seem kind of, I don't know, everybody has chores growing up. But what were they? Because that could give you clues as to, did they grow up on a farm? And if they did, then that could lead you to other records like tax records or agricultural censuses further back like that. That particular picture on the left is a picture of my dad after a day of work in the coal mines. The picture of the tobacco is one that was taken not too far from my parents' home where they grew up, and my grandparents' farm. And they all raised tobacco. They were big tobacco farmers in Kentucky. The top right picture is a picture of my husband's family of a girl pushing a plow. So you know that they had chores. Ask and see if any of your relatives had chores growing up. Ask them what they remember about the oldest living relative. Did they have one? There are people that are alive today that actually talked with people who had lived in slavery, grandparents. Who was the oldest one that they can remember? Now, my grandparents on the left, my grandmother on the top left, they were born in the 1800s. That is a long time ago. I actually talked with people who were born in the 1800s. So when I talked with them, I would ask them sometimes about, well, what was your grandpa like? Their grandparents would have been born in the 1850s and before the Civil War. So ask them, who's the oldest relative that you remember talking to? Now, sometimes if you interview two relatives together, they may have different memories of the very same event. And they'll get to triggering each other and they'll say, oh, no, that didn't happen. Oh, yeah, you know it did, like that. Sometimes that may work well. The two women in the middle are an aunt and a cousin of mine. And I love to hear them talk about the very same event, and it came out in different ways, totally different. I just got the biggest kick out of them. Make sure that their stories can be found. One of the best ways I have found to do that is on FamilySearch in the memory section. This happens to be on my mother's page in FamilySearch, where I can go through and I transcribe some of her journals and put those on there. I wrote about her wedding day and things like that has happened. And it goes on. I have about 60 different stories on there. I have stories that my sisters told me. My sisters, when I was born, they were 16, 19, and 21. So their stories about my parents and about my grandparents are going to be totally different than the stories that I will remember. They had my parents and my grandparents when they were a lot younger. I had them as older people. So be sure that these are recorded so that you can share them, that other people will be able to find them. This is a particular one of my grandmother. When she lived with us, that I had washed my hair one night and had come in to dry it by the fire, and I was wearing my flannel nightgown. My grandmother was very arthritic, and all of a sudden she jumped up and grabbed the broom and knocked me down and started beating the daylights out of me. At 13 years old, I was thinking, what did I say this time? Because I was usually a smart aleck about something. She saw that my hair and my nightgown was ready to ignite. She had already lost a child that had caught fire. She knew the signs. See, that's my story about my grandmother. My sisters don't share that story. That's just my story. I continue to write about that, and as you see, you can tag people in there so that it will also show up on their page. Don't forget to upload pictures. I sometimes have a problem with people that don't want to share their pictures. They're not just for me. They're for everybody, and I don't mind sharing. Those can also be uploaded onto FamilySearch. And again, you can tag anybody that's in those pictures. This is my mother and my 3 sisters in West Virginia, I think. I've got a question mark down there. But I have tagged each one of them so that this picture will also appear on their page. Do as much as we can while they're alive. Don't wait until there's a memory loss or illness or loss of heirlooms and memorabilia that might be taken by fire, taken by family. Don't wait until there's a pandemic and restrictions that prevent us from being there in person with them, or perhaps other family members may forbid us from being there. And don't wait until they have died. In my mother's life, in her journal, she recorded, I can remember going back to the old home place where my mother was born. I can remember the house, the farm. I can remember my great-grandfather Asbury Moore one time when I was a very small child. My line goes from me, Peggy, to my mother, Ida, to Bertha, to Celia, to Asbury Moore, who fought in the Civil War. When my granddaughter touches my hand, she is touching history, because I've touched the hands of somebody who touched someone who was in the Civil War. This is my line going back to that person, Peggy, and then my mom, her mother on the right, and then her mother on the left, and it would have been that great-grandmother whose husband was in the Civil War. Do it. Just do it. Do it now with a plan, and do not let it go. Because people may never remember what you had to say, but they'll always remember how long it took you to say it. So get what you can while you can. Now, come and join me as we go to part 2 and put together a deceased ancestor's life after they've already gone.